Alright, hi everyone. We're on chapter 10, Midsummer's Eve. Remember last chapter they were doing some preparing for Midsummer's Eve, which is the night where all the magical creatures just get to roam free. The only place that they can't get in is the house, just because of the magical properties that bind the magical creatures to different places. So they're free to roam the preserve, but they can't leave the preserve, and they can't go into the house unless someone lets them in. So, we're going to read chapter 10, Midsummer's Eve, and see what happens. And then there'll be questions at the end. Grandpa prodded the logs in the fireplace with a poker. A shower of sparks swirled up the chimney as one log split open, revealing an interior of glowing embers. Dale poured himself a cup of steaming coffee, adding 3 spoonfuls of sugar. Lena peered out the window through the blinds. The sun will reach the horizon in moments, she announced. Kendra sat beside Seth on the sofa, watching Grandpa stoke the fire. The preparations were all in place. The entrances to the house were crowded with jack-o'-lanterns. Lena had been right. Dale had carved more than 200 of them. Not quite 30 fairies had reported for duty. Many fewer than Grandpa had expected, even given their recent strained relations. 8 of the fairy lanterns were placed at the roof outside the attic, 4 at each window. Glow sticks illuminated most of the pumpkins, 2 in each. Grandpa Sorensen apparently ordered them in bulk. Will it start right when the sun goes down? Seth asked. Things won't really get going until twilight fades, Grandpa said, setting the poker beside the other fire irons. But the hour has come for you children to retire to your room. I want to stay up with you, Seth said. The attic bedroom is the safest place in the house, Grandpa replied. Why don't we all stay in the attic? Kendra asked. Grandpa shook his head. The spells that make the attic impenetrable function only if it is occupied by children. Without children, or with adults in the room, the barriers become ineffectual. Isn't the whole house supposed to be safe? Kendra asked. I believe so, but on an enchanted preserve, nothing is ever certain. I'm concerned by the scant number of fairies who reported this afternoon. I worry that this could be a particularly uproarious Midsummer's Eve. Perhaps the worst since I've lived here. A long, mournful howl underscored his statement. The disturbing call was answered by a stronger howl, closer, that ended with a cackle. Chills tingled behind Kendra's shoulders. The sun is gone, Lena reported from the window. She squinted, then put a hand to her mouth. Closing the slat, she immediately stepped away from the blinds. They're already entering the yard. Kendra leaned forward. Lena looked really upset. She had paled visibly. Her dark eyes were unsettled. Grandpa scowled. Real trouble? She nodded. Grandpa clapped his hands together. Up to the attic! The tension in the room prevented Kendra from uttering any protest. Apparently Seth sensed the same urgency. Grandpa Sorensen followed him up the stairs, down the hall, and up into their bedroom. Get under your covers, Grandpa said. What's around the beds? Seth asked, examining the floor. Circles of special salt, Grandpa said, and extra protection. Kendra stepped carefully over the salt, pulled back the covers, and climbed into bed. The sheets felt cool, and Grandpa handed her a pair of small, spongy cylinders. Earplugs, he said, passing a pair to Seth as well. I suggest you wear them. They should help mute the tumult so you can sleep. Just cram them in our ears? Seth asked, eyeing one suspiciously. That's the idea, Grandpa said. An eruption of high-pitched laughter blared up from the yard. Kendra and Seth exchanged a concerned glance. Grandpa took a seat at the edge of Kendra's bed. I need you kids to be brave and responsible for me tonight, he said. They nodded silently. You should know, he went on, I didn't let you come here merely as a favor to your parents. Your grandmother and I are getting on in years. The day will come when somebody will need to care for this preserve. We need to find heirs. Dale is a good man, but he has no interest in running things here. You kids have impressed me so far. You are bright, adventurous, and courageous. There are some unpleasant aspects to living here. Festival nights are a good example. Perhaps you wonder why we don't just all go spend the night in a hotel. If we did, we would return to find the house in ruins. Our presence is essential to the magic that protects these walls. If you're ever going to be involved with the work on this preserve, you will need to learn to cope with certain unpleasant realities. Look at tonight as a test. If the chaotic clamor outside is too much for you, then you do not belong here. There is no shame in this. People who belong here are rare. We'll be fine, Seth said. I believe you will. Listen carefully to my final instructions. Once I leave this room, no matter what you hear, no matter what happens, do not leave your beds. We will not come to check on you until morning. You may think you hear me, or Dale, or Lena asking to come in. Be forewarned, it will not be us. This room is invulnerable unless you open a window or the door. Remain in your beds and that will not happen. With the fairy lanterns at your window, odds are that nothing will come near this part of the house. Try to ignore the tumult of the night, and we'll all share a special breakfast in the morning. Any questions?" "I'm scared," Kendra said. "Don't go. You'll be safer without me. We'll be keeping watch downstairs all night. Everything will be fine. Just go to sleep." "It's okay, Grandpa," Seth said. "I'll keep an eye on her." "Keep the other eye on yourself," Grandpa said sternly. "You mind me tonight. This is no game." "I will." Outside, the wind began to whistle through the trees. The day had been calm, but now a groaning gust shook the house. Overhead, the shingles rattled and timbers creaked. Grandpa crossed to the door. "Strange winds are blowing. I better get downstairs. Good night. Sleep tight. I'll greet you at sunrise." He closed the door. The wind subsided, and Goldilocks clucked softly. "You've got to be kidding," Kendra said. "I know," Seth said. "I'm practically wetting the bed. I don't think I'll sleep at all. I know I won't." "We better try," said Kendra. "Okay." Kendra inserted the earplugs. Closing her eyes, she curled up and snuggled into her covers. All she had to do was fall asleep, and she could escape the frightening sounds of the night. She forced herself to relax, letting her body go limp, and tried to clear her mind. It was so hard not to fantasize about inheriting the estate. No way would they give it to Seth. He would blow the whole place up in 5 minutes. What would it be like to know all of the mysterious secrets of Fablehaven? It might be scary if she were alone. She'd have to share the secret with her parents so they could live with her. After a couple of minutes, she rolled over to face the other direction. She always had a tough time falling asleep when she was too deliberate about it. She tried to think of nothing, tried to focus on calm, regular breathing. Seth was saying something, but the earplugs muffled it. She pulled them out. "What?" "I said, the suspense is killing me. Are you actually using the earplugs?" "Of course you're not. I don't want to miss anything." "Are you crazy?" "I'm not tired at all," he said. "Are you?" "Not much." "Dare me to look out the window?" "Don't be stupid. It's barely sunset. What better time to look?" "How about never?" "You're a bigger chicken than Goldilocks." "You've got less brains than Hugo." The wind rose again, steadily gaining force. Warbling moans echoed in the breeze, groaning in different pitches, forming eerie, discordant harmonies. A long bird-like scream overpowered the ghostly chorus of moans, starting at one side of the house, passing overhead, and finally fading. In the distance, a bell began to toll. Seth no longer looked quite so brave. "Maybe we should try to get some sleep," he said, putting in the earplugs. Kendra did likewise. The sounds were muffled but continued, the haunted wind lamenting, the house shuddering, an increasing assortment of shrieks, screams, howls, and wild bursts of gibbering laughter. The pillow grew warm, so Kendra flipped it over to the cold side. The only light in the room had been filtering through the curtains. As twilight dimmed, the room darkened. Kendra pushed her hands over her ears, trying to augment the dampening power of the earplugs. She told herself sounds were just a storm. A deep, throbbing beat joined the cacophony, keeping a steady rhythm. As the pulsing percussion increased in volume and tempo, it was accompanied by a chanting in the wailing language. Kendra resisted otherworldly images of vicious demons on the hunt. A pair of hands closed around her throat. She jumped and flailed, smacking Seth across the cheek with the back of her hand. "Geez," Seth complained, stumbling away. "You asked for it. What's the matter with you?" "You should have seen your face," he laughed, recovering from the slap. "Get back in bed." He sat on the side of her bed. "You should take out your earplugs. The noise isn't so bad after a while. It reminds me of that CD that Dad plays on Halloween." She removed them. "Yeah, except it's shaking the house, and it isn't so make-believe." "Don't you want to look out the window?" "No! Stop talking about it." Seth leaned over and turned on the nightlight, a glowing statuette of Snoopy. "I don't see the big deal. I mean, there are all sorts of cool things out there right now. What's wrong with just taking a little peek?" "Grandpa said not to get out of your bed." "Grandpa lets people look when they get older," Seth said. "Dale told me. So it can't be that dangerous. Grandpa just thinks I'm an idiot." "Yeah, and he's right. Think about it. You wouldn't want to run across a tiger out in the wilderness. You'd be scared to death. But at a zoo, who cares? It can't get you. This room is safe. Peeking out the window will be like looking at a zoo full of monsters. More like looking out of a shark cage." A sudden staccato flurry of pounding shook the roof, as if a team of horses were galloping across the shingles. Seth flinched, raising his arms protectively. Kendra heard the creak and rattle of wagon wheels. "Don't you want to see what that was?" Seth asked. "Are you trying to tell me that didn't scare you?" "I expect to be scared. That's the whole point." "If you don't get back in bed," Kendra warned, "I'm telling Grandpa in the morning." "Don't you want to see who's playing the drums?" "Seth, I'm not kidding. You probably won't even be able to see anything. We have a telescope." Something outside roared, a thunderous bellow of bestial ferocity. It was enough to silence the conversation. The night continued to rage. The roar came again, if anything, with greater intensity, momentarily drowning out all the other commotion. Kendra and Seth eyed one another. "I bet it's a dragon," he said breathlessly, running over to the window. "Seth, no!" Seth pulled aside the curtain. The 4 jack-o'-lanterns shared a mellow illumination across the portion of the roof directly beyond the window. For a moment, Seth thought he saw something swirling in the darkness at the edge of the light, a whirling mass of silky black fabric. Then he saw only blackness. "No stars," he reported. "Seth, get away from there!" Kendra had her sheets pulled up to her eyes. He squinted through the window a moment longer. "Too dark. I can't see anything." A glimmering fairy floated up from one of the jack-o'-lanterns, peering at Seth through the slightly warped window pane. "Hey, a fairy came out." The tiny fairy waved an arm and was joined by 3 others. One made a face at Seth, and then all 4 streaked away into the night. Now he could see nothing. Seth closed the curtain and backed away from the window. "You had your look," Kendra said. "Are you satisfied?" "The fairies and the jack-o'-lanterns flew away," he said. "Nice work. They probably saw who they were guarding." "Actually, I think you're right. One of them made a face at me." "Get back in bed," Kendra ordered. The drumming ceased, along with the chanting. The ghostly wind grew quiet. The howls and screams and laughter diminished in the volume and frequency. Something pattered across the roof, and then silence. "Something's wrong," Seth whispered. "They probably saw you. Get back in bed." "I have a flashlight in my emergency kit." He went to the nightstand by his bed and withdrew a small flashlight from the cereal box. Kendra kicked off her sheets and lunged at Seth, tackling him onto his bed. She wrenched the flashlight from his grasp and pushed him off to regain her feet. He charged her, twisting. She used his momentum to shove him onto the bed. "Quit it, Seth, or I'll go get Grandpa right now." "I'm not the one starting a fight." His expression was a portrait of wounded resentment. She hated when he tried to act like the victim after initiating the trouble. "Neither am I. First you hit me, then you jump on me. You stop breaking the rules or I'm going straight downstairs. You're worse than the witch. Grandpa should build you a shack. Get in your bed. Give me my light. I bought it with my own money." They were interrupted by the sound of a baby crying. There was nothing desperate about it, just the bawling of an upset infant. The crying seemed to emanate from outside the darkened window. "A little baby," Seth said. "No, it's a trick." "Mama," the baby whined. "Sounds pretty real," Seth said. "Let me take a look. It's gonna be a skeleton or something." Seth grabbed the flashlight from Kendra. She neither gave it to him nor prevented him from taking it. He jogged over to the window, holding the front of the flashlight against the window pane and cupping a hand around it to minimize the reflection. He switched it on. "Oh my gosh," he said. "It's really a baby." "Anything else?" "Just a crying baby." The crying stopped. "Now he's looking at me." Kendra could no longer resist. She went and stood behind Seth. There on the roof, just beyond the window, stood a tear-streaked toddler who looked barely old enough to stand. The baby wore cloth diapers and nothing else. He had wispy blonde curls and a little round tummy with an outie belly button. Eyes brimming with tears, the child held out its pudgy arms toward the window. "It has to be a trick," Kendra said. "An illusion." Spotlighted by the flashlight, the toddler took a step toward the window and fell on all fours. He pouted on the verge of crying again. Standing up, the baby tried another wobbly step. Goosebumps stood out on his arms and chest. "He looks real," Seth said. "What if he's real? Why would a baby be on the roof?" The baby toddled to the window, pressing a chubby palm against the glass. Something glinted in the light behind him, and Seth shifted the beam onto a pair of green-eyed wolves approaching stealthily from the edge of the roof. The animals paused as the light beam fell on them. Both looked mangy and lean. One of the wolves bared sharp teeth, foam frothing from its mouth. The other was missing an eye. Theo. Sorry, my dog was about to start barking. "They're using him as bait," Seth yelled. The baby looked back at the wolves, then turned back toward Kendra and Seth. Bawling with renewed vigor, fresh tears streaming, tiny hands slapping the window panes, the wolves charged and the toddler wailed. In her cage, Goldilocks clucked wildly. Seth threw open the window. "No!" Kendra shouted, although she reflexively wanted to do the same. The instant the window opened, wind gushed into the room as if the air itself had been waiting to pounce. The baby dove into the room, transforming grotesquely as it landed on the floor in a deft somersault. The child was replaced by a leering goblin with yellow slits for eyes, a puckered nose, and a face like a dried cantaloupe. Bald and scabrous on top, the head was fringed with long, web-like hair. The sinuous arms were gangly, and the hands long and leathery, tipped with hooked claws. Ribs, collarbones, and pelvises jutted hideously. Spidery networks of veins bulged against maroon flesh. With supernatural haste, the wolves also sailed through the window before Seth could move to close it. Kendra shoved past Seth and jerked the window shut in time to impede the entrance of a coldly beautiful woman swathed in writhing black garments. The apparition's dark hair undulated like vapor in the breeze. Her pallid face was slightly translucent. Gazing into those empty, searing eyes froze Kendra where she stood. Babbling whispers filled her mind. Her mouth felt dry. She could not swallow. Seth yanked the curtains shut and tugged Kendra toward the bed. Whatever trance had momentarily gorgonized her dissolved. Disoriented, she ran alongside Seth to the bed, sensing something in pursuit. When they leaped onto the mattress, a brilliant light flared behind them, accompanied by a crisp stutter like fireworks. Kendra twisted to get a look. The maroon goblin stood near the bed, coddling its bony shoulder. The scowling creature stood about as tall as Dale. Hesitantly, it reached a knobby hand toward her, and another bright flash sent it staggering away. The circle of salt! At first, she had not grasped why Seth had dragged her to the bed. At least one of them was thinking. Glancing down, Kendra saw the 2-inch dune of salt surrounding the bed indeed marked the line that the goblin could not cross. A 12-foot centipede with 3 sets of wings and 3 pairs of taloned feet corkscrewed around the room in a complex aerial display. A brutish monster with a pronounced underbite and plates down its spine hurled a wardrobe across the room. The wolves had shed their disguises as well. The maroon goblin cavorted around the room in a feral tantrum, tearing down bookshelves, upsetting toy chests, and snapping the horn off the rocking horse. It picked up Goldilocks' cage and flung it across the wall. The slender bars crumpled and the door sprang open. The terrified chicken took an ungainly flight in a flurry of golden feathers. Goldilocks was coming toward the bed. The winged centipede struck at the flustered hen but missed. The maroon demon made an acrobatic leap and caught the chicken by both legs. Goldilocks clucked and squirmed in mortal panic. Seth jumped on the bed. Crouching, he scooped up 2 handfuls from the circle of salt and charged the wiry goblin. Now holding the chicken in one hand, the sneering goblin rushed to meet him. An instant before the outstretched hand of the demon reached him, Seth flung a handful of salt. Releasing Goldilocks, the demon reeled back, scorched by a blinding blaze. The chicken made straight for the bed, and Seth tossed the other handful of salt in a wide arc to cover their retreat, scalding the flying centipede in the process. The bulky creature with the underbite tried to beat Seth to the bed, arriving too late and receiving a violent shock as it collided with the invisible salt barrier. Back on the bed, Seth clung to Goldilocks, arms quivering convulsively. There's the centipede right here, and then the goblin. Seth, Kendra, and Goldilocks are right there. The maroon goblin growled. His face and chest were charred from the salt. Tendrils of smoke curled up from the burns. Turning, the demon pulled a book from the shelf and tore it in half. The door flew open, and Dale leveled a shotgun at the monster with the underbite. "You kids stay put, no matter what," he called. All 3 monsters converged on the doorway. Dale retreated down the stairs, gun silent. The winged centipede spiraled out of the room above the other scrambling creatures. They heard a shotgun blast from down the hall. "Shut the door and stay put," Dale hollered. Kendra ran and slammed the door, then sprinted back to her bed. Seth held Goldilocks, tears streaming down his cheeks. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he whimpered. "It'll be okay." From downstairs came repeated gunshots, growls, roars, shrieks, glass shattering, wood splintering. Outside, the cacophonous uproar resumed louder than ever. Pagan drums, ethereal choirs, tribal chanting, wailing lamentations, guttural snarls, unnatural howls, and piercing screams united in relentless disharmony. Kendra, Seth, and Goldilocks sat on the bed awaiting dawn. Kendra had to constantly fight images of the woman with the swirling black garments. She could not get the apparition out of her mind. When she had looked into those soulless eyes, even though the lady was outside, Kendra had felt certain there would be no escape. Late in the night, the furor finally began to relent, replaced by more unnerving sounds. Babies began to cry beyond the window again, calling for Mama. When that failed to elicit a response, the voices of children pleaded for help. "Kendra, please hurry, they're coming! Seth, Seth, open up, help us! Seth, don't leave us out here!" After the cries, when ignored for a while, snarls and screams would simulate the demise of the young supplicants. Then a new batch of solicitors began begging for admittance. Perhaps the most disconcerting was when Grandpa was inviting them down for breakfast. "We made it, kids. The sun is rising. Come on, Lena cooked hotcakes." "How do we know you're our Grandpa?" Kendra asked, more than a little suspicious. "Because I love you. Hurry, the food's getting cold." I don't think the sun is up yet, Seth replied. It's just a little cloudy this morning. Go away, Kendra said. Just let me in. I want to kiss you good morning. Our grandpa never kisses us, you sicko, Seth yelled. Get out of our house. The exchange was followed by a vicious banging on the door for a solid 5 minutes. The hinges shook, but the door held. The night wore on, and Kendra leaned against the headboard as Seth dozed at her side. Despite the noise, her eyelids began to feel heavy. Suddenly, she jerked awake. Gray light was seeping through the curtains. Goldilocks wandered the floor, pecking at kernels from her spilled bucket of food. When the curtains were masking unmistakable sunlight, Kendra nudged Seth. He looked around, blinking, and then crept to the window and peeked out. The sun is officially up, he announced. We made it. I'm scared to go downstairs, whispered Kendra. Everybody's fine, Seth said nonchalantly. Then why haven't they come up to get us? Seth had no response. Kendra had gone easy on him during the night. The consequences for opening the window were brutal enough without placing blame and starting arguments. And Seth had really acted remorseful, but now he was reverting to his idiot self. Kendra glared at him. You realize you might have killed them all. His face fell and he turned away, shoulders shaking with sobs. He buried his face in his hands. They're probably fine, he squeaked. Dale had a gun and everything. They know how to handle themselves. Kendra felt bad, seeing that Seth clearly was worried, too. She went to him and tried to give him a hug. He shoved her away. Leave me alone. Seth, whatever happened isn't your fault. Of course it's my fault. His nose was getting congested. I mean, they tricked us. I sort of wanted to open the window, too, when I saw those wolves charging, in case it wasn't fake. I knew it might be a trick, he sobbed, but that baby looked so real. I thought they might have kidnapped him to use him as bait. I thought I could save him. You were trying to do the right thing. She attempted to hug him once more, but he pushed her away again. Don't, he snapped. I didn't mean to blame you, said Kendra. You were acting like you didn't even care. Of course I care. You don't think I'm terrified to go down there and find out what I did? You didn't do it. They tricked you. I would have opened the window if you hadn't. If I would have stayed in bed, none of it would have happened, Seth lamented. Maybe they're fine. Right, and they let a monster come in the house and up to our door pretending to be Grandpa. Maybe they had to hide down in the basement or someplace. Seth was no longer crying. He picked up a doll and used her dress to wipe his nose. I hope so. Just in case something bad did happen, you can't blame yourself. All you did was open a window. If those monsters did something bad, it's their fault. Partly. Grandpa and Lena and Dale all know that living here is risky. I'm sure they're fine, but if they aren't, you mustn't blame yourself. Whatever. I'm serious. I like it better when you're funny. You know what I liked? Kendra said. What? When you saved Goldilocks. He laughed, snorting a little through his stuffed-up nostrils. Did you see how bad the salt burned that guy? He retrieved the doll and wiped his nose again on the dress. It was really brave. I'm just glad it worked. It was quick thinking. Seth glanced at the door and then back at Kendra. We should probably go check out the damage. If you say so. Okay, that's the end of the chapter. The next one is the aftermath, so we'll see all the consequences of Seth opening up that window. So, got a few questions here. Not too many. Is it going to focus? Let's try it again. There it goes. Alright, so number 1. Why did only 30 fairies report for duty? Number 2. Why can't Grandpa and Lena stay in the attic with the kids? Number 3. What did Grandpa put around the kids' beds? Number 4. Why did Seth end up opening the window? Number 5. What was the baby really? Number 6. What did Kendra see out the window when she looked? Number 7. How did Seth know it wasn't really Grandpa telling him and Kendra to open the attic door? What gave it away? Number 8. What do you think Seth and Kendra will find when they go downstairs? They're about to go downstairs and find the aftermath, the consequences of opening that window. What do you think's going to happen? And number 9. Seth blames himself for letting all the monsters into the house, but Kendra keeps telling him that it wasn't his fault. Do you agree with Kendra? Do you think it wasn't his fault? Tell me why or why not. Alright, so there's chapter 10. We'll do the next chapter in a few days. Have a good day.